And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 102. Going to talk some fantasy baseball tonight, and in order to do so, I have a guest from Razzball.com. You can find him on Twitter at Razzball_MB. Matt Bowe, how we doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing? 102. Wow, that's how long have you been running this joint?
I've been working on this a couple years now, I guess. I kind of picked up the pace to 2 a week here about 6 months ago, but yeah, it's been a little grind.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on. I'm happy to be here and happy to talk some football, baseball, whatever you want with you.
Yeah, tonight we'll talk some football. Baseball has been going strong, and we'll keep talking baseball until it's all said and done. But you know how it goes in the world we live in, that it's already football season because football barely ever sleeps. So we better get cracking. And before we go, we're going to talk some running backs and some wide receiver things. You've had a couple really good pieces come out recently on Razzball. And before we do so, I just wanted to get your opinion on something that dropped like 20 minutes ago as I was taking a couple more notes. Jameis Winston, it's like 99% sure going to happen, is going to be suspended the first 3 games of the year. I'm still, like I told you earlier, getting my feet wet in the whole offseason of football, but you've been digging in. What's your thoughts on this whole process? I know Fitzpatrick's not great, but what's your take on this?
Okay, from a fantasy football standpoint, it's obviously not good for Mike Evans or Deshaun Jackson, Chris Godwin, O.J. Howard, or Cameron Brate. From a Tampa Bay Buccaneers standpoint, I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I don't think Jameis Winston has that large of an effect on whether they'd win their first 3 games. Keep in mind that they go to New Orleans the first game, and then I believe it's Pittsburgh and Philadelphia in weeks 2 and 3 at home. Mm-hmm. And they were staring down 0-3 from the start right away. So I'm glad that this didn't drag on, kind of like the Ezekiel Elliott thing last year. I'm kind of upset because it kind of seems like he didn't really have much to do with it. It was just a failure to report. My initial worry was that it was actually him who did it, and I was very upset about it because I'm very much a proponent of the Me Too movement and keeping your hands to yourself and whatnot. So, but it did come out that it wasn't really, he didn't have any involvement in the actual act. So now I feel like it should be 1 game tops, but 3 games is a little rough. But they're going to be 0-3 anyway. As for who should be the quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he had a pretty decent game against Arizona last year when Jameis left with an injury early in the season. As for game planning for 3 games, I'm not sure it's a great thing. Maybe sign Kaepernick. I don't know if Tampa wants to sign Kaepernick. Nobody did last year, but if you're desperate, and I assume Dirk Cutter is desperate to win some football games this year. Mm-hmm. So I would assume that signing Kaepernick is probably the best thing that they could do, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think they'll probably end up rolling with Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I'd imagine they just roll with it as long as he's only out 3 games. They'll just, bite the bullet, like you said. They're going to be lucky to be 1-2 after that 3-game stretch. It was a murderer's row of situations, and it just lined up. If there's ever going to be a time for Winston to miss games this year, it might as well be the first 3 games of the season.
Exactly,
the best thing that could happen to him. And then I agree with what you said. It was kind of surprising to me because I actually was reading stuff on Winston a couple days ago about the whole incident and all these things, and I'm 100% with you. You never lay hands on a woman. You never do anything like that. That's just rule 1 when it comes to men and women to me. But you read the reports, and it was very gray, very, very gray. And it seemed like you said he didn't do anything. It seemed like. Now,
sounds like he wasn't even in the car. It sounds like it was his Uber account.
Yeah, and that's what the weirdest thing is. It's like, okay, I'm glad the NFL's trying to make a stand for once after the whole Ray Rice incident that they butchered, but there's a point where you still have to be just to the system. And this seems like they're kind of just, maybe he's got something else they needed to punish him for, and they're using this as an excuse. I have no idea. But yeah, it's odd. But I just wanted to bring that up before we get cracking on some of these other things. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But you kind of summed it up perfectly. Where if he's going to miss 3 games, this is the way to do it. Ryan Fitzpatrick's likely the scenario. Is he a fix-all? No, because in reality, in your fantasy football season, the first 3 weeks there's really not a bye week anyway, so you don't need a guy like Fitzpatrick sitting around.
And the thing is, nobody's playing their best football in September.
Yes.
So as a Bucs fan, my hope is that they're able to squeak one of those 2 games against Philly or Pittsburgh out at home. I assume New Orleans is a loss. That's a really tough place to play. Historically they haven't fared well there. But they need one big game from Fitzpatrick to roll into Chicago, which I'll be attending that game at Chicago Bears. Jameis's first game back. I'd like to see them at 1-2 at that point, and then I wouldn't be too upset with how the season started.
That'd be good. Let's go into the running back position here for a little bit. Talk some Green Bay Packers. They have quite the depth chart at running back. You have Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones, and Ty Montgomery, and they all kind of serve a different purpose in the system. And they've already come out and said there's really no – it's going to be a committee. That's the way they're looking at it. There's no set, number one back right now. And a lot of this I'm just going to preface now. We're going to talk about a lot of things tonight, and obviously there is training camps. There's a lot of stuff that's going to take place before the start of the season. But at this point in time, Matt, what are you thinking when it comes to Green Bay's backfield when you approach it in draft?
When I'm approaching the draft, I want the last one on the board. I am taking someone else's take from Twitter. I read that, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. I can't remember who it was, so I can't shout him out. But that is definitely the approach that you want to take. There's injuries. Aaron Rodgers is back. Ty Montgomery, he's going to be involved in the passing game, but I don't know if it'll be enough for him to really be fantasy relevant. If I had to pick one name, I'd probably say Jamal Williams. He looked probably like the best out of the 3 out of the backfield towards the end of the season last year. And that's nothing to take away from Aaron Jones because he looked good last year when he got the starts. But I think if I wanted anyone, and I think he's probably going to end up being the last one on the board, if you're excluding Ty Montgomery, I think it'd be Jamal Williams for me.
All right. Yeah, it's just definitely be something to monitor. Ty Montgomery in a PPR does have some value, but if he's not playing, at least 2 out of the 3 main downs, it's going to be kind of tough to get there.
Exactly.
For sure.
In fantasy football, it's all about volume.
Yeah, all about the volume. That's the tough part about the running back position. And as we get closer to the season, I'll ask you now, from what you've seen in your early research, it's kind of the hot topic is in years past, it was like there's 2 or 3 workhorse backs, and then it was kind of like a lot of committees and people were trying to go for wide receiver heavy drafts. And now you're hearing all this talk about 0 wide receivers and getting all the running backs you can. What kind of philosophy at early glance of rankings and whatnot are you looking at?
It's going to depend on which position I'm in the first round. If I'm early, if I'm one of the first 5 picks, I am going to take one of the 5 running backs. I'm going to target either Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, not Ezekiel Elliott at number 1, but just 5 names: Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, and gosh, there's one slipping my mind right now. Saquon Barkley. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. And if I'm somewhere in the middle, I'm targeting probably DeAndre Hopkins and then Antonio Brown. They're 1A and 1B, but with Deshaun Watson back, I love DeAndre Hopkins even more. But as a whole, usually I try and get a running back in the first round. If I'm ending up with DeAndre Hopkins or Antonio Brown in the middle of the round, I'm going to try and get LaShawn McCoy in the second round. And
that LaShawn McCoy is interesting. Yeah, LaShawn McCoy is really interesting because, right now you got guys like Fantasy Pros and everything. They have him ranked 12th overall. This guy's been a top 5 or 6 running back in the last few years. What's your thoughts? Since you mentioned him, I wanted to ask you, what's your thoughts on him falling that far already?
Well, I assume it's age bias because he's going into his age 30 season. But he's going to be the focal point of that offense. They'll be able to give him some breaths with Chris Ivory and everything. And with A.J. McCarron and Josh Allen coming into his first year, like I'm not a big Josh Allen guy at all. But it's not going to help the passing game too much. It's going to be the same thing as it was last year. Their main weapon is Kelvin Benjamin, and he's not a huge difference maker. It'll be interesting to see what the steps that Zay Jones can take in his second year. I think Charles Clay is still on the roster, so he'll be a part of the offense. But LaShawn McCoy, I mean, it should be another 300 carry season for him.
I like it. Let's go to the Carolina Panthers backfield, and Christian McCaffrey coming off a really, really good rookie season.
Mm-hmm.
He's a factor in the passing game and a little bit in the running game, especially more it seems like towards the end of the season. But they went out and kind of surprised some, but not many, not a bunch. Signing C.J. Anderson, free agent from Denver. This was kind of a big move because, you lose Jonathan Stewart. You think Christian McCaffrey is going to take over and be the big time back. Now you bring in another Jonathan Stewart. So what's your take on this backfield?
Well, he doesn't have the body to run in between the tackles. He's very dynamic. I mean, he is probably the most dynamic passing down back in the league that doesn't have the 3-down back ability. I think it's a great move by Carolina to bring him in, to bring in C.J. Anderson. I think C.J. Anderson could have a really big season at playing that Jonathan Stewart role. Keep in mind, he did have 1,000 yards last year with Denver, and he barely played 50% of the snaps. If he was on the field more, he would have had a much better fantasy season from a week-to-week standpoint. I mean, he did have big weeks. But as a week-to-week starter, I mean, you never knew when to start him unless you absolutely had to, and then you were just kind of praying it'd be one of his big weeks. But Christian McCaffrey is someone I'm not too high on. He has a second-round ADP. I think he's at like 22 right now, which would be kind of tail end of the second round in 12-team drafts. They've added a lot of weapons in Carolina, and Greg Olsen is going to be back. Christian McCaffrey was a big part of the passing game because Greg Olsen wasn't there anymore, or with the injury. They added DJ Moore. Curtis Samuels is going to be healthy this year, so it's great for Cam Newton. So I think Cam Newton is a nice value this year because he's being drafted in the mid rounds because he should have some more weapons. But it's not great for Christian McCaffrey, especially since he isn't the type to run between the tackles.
Yeah, no, it definitely hurts him. And he was one of your running backs that are undraftable for you. Another guy you had on the list, and I'm really curious to get your take on this one, is Marshawn Lynch, who's coming off a pretty decent season there for Oakland, running for almost 900 yards and making 20 catches for 150 more yards. And he was a part-time back then, and obviously they went and got Doug Martin, and John Gruden's coming to town. So what's your take on Marshawn Lynch coming into the season?
That's kind of something that I've been looking at since I've written that article, and maybe I was a little too harsh on Marshawn Lynch. He did finish 25th in PPR running backs, and I think it was number 20 overall in standard last year. But they brought in Doug Martin, who apparently has looked good in training or in OTAs and early season work with the Raiders. So you can take that for what it's worth. I mean, Tampa said that last year with him too. And I mean, look what happened. It just didn't pan out. But Oakland's offensive line is much better than Tampa's is. So Marshawn Lynch, he's entering his age 32 season, and they still have Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington. I think it's still probably going to be a part-time role for Marshawn Lynch, no matter what way that the offense shakes out or the roster, the depth chart. But my whole take on it was that I would rather take a high upside back, like, one of the ones we talked about, Green Bay, whichever one of them falls, maybe Chris Thompson or, one of the Denver guys, because they'll probably have a split backfield. But Marshawn Lynch his ceiling's a little too low for me to take in the 5th or 6th round.
No, that makes sense because you really don't know how that's going to shake out at this point in time. When we talk about the New Orleans Saints, we had 2 of the most dynamic running backs in the NFL last year in Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. We know Ingram's going to be out for the first 4 games of the season. So what do you have on these guys? Because Kamara is already creeping into people are expecting him to carry both backs' workloads early in the year and make him an ultimate running back, but I just don't see it happening. So, what's your thoughts on that backfield?
Yeah, I am avoiding Alvin Kamara like the plague this year. I'm not touching him. In that Undraftables article, I felt like writing about him would be kind of beating a dead horse because I talk about him a lot on the podcast. And I feel like that's not a really original take because I feel like a lot of people have been saying that. But he's not a 3-down back. That's just not the style of football that he plays. He's a dynamic back when he gets the ball on the outside, whether it be a screen pass or a toss to the outside. He's a guy that you want touching the ball 12 to 18 times a game and not 25 to 30. And remember, he didn't finish the season too strong. I mean, excluding the playoffs, but in the fantasy playoffs, he didn't finish the season too strong. I think his ADP is right around 7 now, and I would rather target a wide receiver there if I'm sitting there, or a running back that maybe slips through. Maybe if Antonio Brown or DeAndre Hopkins go off the board 5 and 6, maybe Ezekiel Elliott sitting there, or Saquon Barkley. Those are 2. Or I'd rather have Kareem Hunt also myself. So yeah, I was just about to ask. Yeah, I'd rather.
I was just about to ask you if you wanted Hunt. What about Melvin Gordon?
Yeah, absolutely. And wrap around in a 12-team snake draft if you can get Melvin Gordon, and then grab your receiver, grab a RB2, grab a lot of people like Jordan Howard. I'm not in the Jordan Howard camp, but if you can go with Melvin Gordon and LaShawn McCoy, I mean, I think that's a hell of a start. And then you can focus on your wide receiver position. Maybe, I don't know, with the return of Andrew Luck, if T.Y. Hilton's around in round 3, but you can start working on your wide receiver position or tight end with Travis Kelce or Gronk.
Yeah, you can definitely do a lot of stuff with that, and I like that. A guy that's ranked right around Melvin Gordon right now is Dalvin Cook, who started off his rookie campaign just lights out, 4 games, 354 rushing yards. His catching passes just look like a monster, and then the injury took place. He's going to be back this year, and everybody's expecting him to pick up right where he left off. What's your thoughts on Dalvin Cook coming into the year?
I think it's a little high. I think the expectations are high because it was a torn ACL, and I don't know. I didn't play. I never tore my ACL or anything, so I don't know. But it's just like common sense to me tells me that it would probably be a little harder to make the running back cuts than the wide receiver cuts. So it just is when running the ball is what I'm referring to. So I'm not sure if he's going to have a strong start to the season. So I think he might be a buy low candidate in the October range if he doesn't start off well, because I mean, this happened in week 3 or 4 last year. So
yep.
I'd be surprised if he's totally 100%. It sounds like he's gonna participate in everything, and he's gonna be in training camp, and he'll be available for week 1. But as far as being 100% Dalvin Cook, I'm not sold on him. So I don't think I'm gonna target him in the 2nd round, but I'm definitely gonna keep an eye on the numbers. And if he doesn't start off well, I'm definitely gonna want to buy low because he's a very talented cat.
Yeah, I think once he gets healthy, he's gonna be a beast. So definitely something that, like you said, keep an eye on if you don't grab him. Maybe he has a couple bad weeks and you can snipe him from somebody.
Is he someone that you're targeting in the 2nd round?
I would think about it. It depends on if I'm like late second round, then yes, but I don't think he'll get that far because it seems like everybody wants him early second round, and like it depends on the 12 teams. I've heard guys even say maybe at the end of the first round. So
I've seen
there's some people that are really, really high on him, and
I've seen an industry draft where he went 5th off the board.
Yep.
I mean, that's wild.
As I'm saying, I won't come to that. That's not happening at all. So it's crazy that goes back to that point where it seems like a lot more talk this year. If people want to grab those running backs that don't have too much committee work really early this year, they're really focused on that.
It's smart. It's a smart strategy. You just it all comes down to picking the right guys.
Yeah. It's like last year I got lucky.
I mean, easy to say, but it's definitely said than done.
Definitely. Let's talk about some rookie running backs. I got Saquon Barkley, who everybody's in love with, Darius Geis, Sony Michel, Royce Freeman, so on and so forth. There's many of them. Just kind of give a synopsis of what you looked at so far. You don't have to go super one or pick one if you want. It doesn't matter to me. But, Saquon Barkley, everybody thinks he's the sun, the earth, and the moon in New York. But thoughts on rookie class and what to look forward to fantasy-wise?
I am kind of in that camp where I think he is a really big deal. I mean, the guy just has tree trunks for legs. He's an absolute specimen of a human being, and I think he'll have a lot of success in New York. I think the offensive line will be a lot better than it was last year. I don't know. I'd say probably middle of the road. We're not talking about a top offensive line by any means. Excuse me. But yeah, I have no problem with taking him in the middle of the first round. I think it's a good value, especially since Eli Manning's not going to be very good. I mean, he's just not going to be. He's not going to be good anymore. So if you haven't accepted that, just kind of start facing facts here. Ronald Jones is a guy that I really like in Tampa, especially with Jameis Winston being suspended for the first 3 games. I'm definitely going to shoot him up my rankings more than I have already. The problem with that is Peyton Barber is going to see a share of the workload. But I think if Ronald Jones can do work with the 15 to 18 touches that he gets a game, then I don't think it's really going to matter, and I think he's going to be a value as far as where you're finding him in drafts. Royce Freeman, I'm a little worried because I know they want to give Devontae Booker a lot of work, and Denver's offensive line is not very good. I'm just not sold on that offense at all this year, especially Case Keenum. Case Keenum's getting downgraded at wide receiver. Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen are a lot better at this stage than Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, it's not 2015 anymore, folks. Let's see. Rashad Penny in Seattle. I like it from a volume standpoint, and I think it's boomer bust. He's not going to be someone that I'm going to target, but if he falls into, I can't remember his ADP off the top of my head, but if he's fallen into the 5th or 6th round, I'm definitely scooping him up, but I don't think he is. I think he's like a 3rd or 4th round guy. But if he does fall into the 5th round, I'm snagging him up. But the offensive line isn't good in Seattle, but I think he's a good volume play, like I said. And I think a safety net possibly for Russell Wilson. So let's see. We covered those. Is there any other rookie running backs that I can think of off the top of my head? I think that's the big 4 right there.
Yeah, that's kind of the 4 we've been hearing, and there's always something that'll pop up out of nowhere. By like week 3, you'll be like, "Oh crap, there's that guy."
Oh, absolutely.
That never fails. It's probably won't even be. You'll probably be an unsigned rookie. It's just how it works. Yeah. But that's the NFL for you. I got one more running back question for you, then we'll move on to the wide receivers. Jerick McKinnon, and I was doing some research again, and out here in California, their area about him, and Mike Shanahan's going to make him the next version that he had in Atlanta of this dual threat running back, and I don't see it, but people do. And he's like the 14th or 15th running back off the board right now. Are you as high on him as others are, or are you just kind of like, this is Jerick McKinnon who's never done this by himself?
Yes, I am actually I'm very high on Jerick McKinnon this year. I'll be targeting him in the 3rd or 4th round. I like that he reminds me a lot of he can play the role of Devonta Freeman. He can do big things with Shanahan. Just kind of it's Matt Breida. That's his competition for touches. I think they're going to be creative with him. I think he's a good PPR option. I liked what I saw from him in Minnesota last year. I thought he was really explosive. But once again, my only worry is kind of like the Alvin Kamara thing is, and you kind of mentioned it, like it's as a three down back, I'm not totally sold. But if he's getting volume, I'm all for it. My preference is him getting 20 touches a game as opposed to 30. But yeah, I think he's a talented guy, and I think he's going to be in the right system. And I think he's someone that Jimmy Garoppolo will seek out a lot to get him the ball in the passing game. And I think he'll be a big fixture in the running game as well.
Yeah, because there are parts to like about his last season. He had a couple of monster names, especially when he was kind of the 2-down back compared to the rotating back. And then you saw with the system with the Niners last year, Carlos Hyde was a PPR magnet. So there might be a lot to like about McKinnon. We shall see what he can actually do, but definitely something to keep an eye on.
Carlos Hyde should have had an even bigger season last year, but I felt like Matt Breida took away some of his work. But yeah, I thought Carlos Hyde looked like an RB1 last year when he was on the field.
What do you think about his new look? What do you think about Hyde's new location?
That's tough. It's really tough because I don't know what they're going to do with Chubb. Chubb's another rookie running back. So I don't know what they're going to do. I think it's going to be one of those training camp battle things because Duke Johnson's going to be involved. He's going to be a 3rd down back at times. He's going to play in the slot at times. So really, I mean, one of those two have to emerge as the first 2-down backs. God, they're both talented. I mean, Nick Chubb, he looked really good in Georgia, and Carlos Hyde looked really good last year in San Francisco. And it's tough to tell with Hugh Jackson because, to be quite frank with you, he sucks ass as a coach. So
he's horrible.
He's the worst coach. How
he's employed is beyond us.
They could both touch the ball 10 times a game, and it could just be a complete kerfuffle. I mean, it might be a situation to totally avoid unless you're scooping up Duke Johnson in the mid rounds, which I would recommend doing.
Yeah. I love Duke.
Yeah, I mean he finishes very high every year in PPR, and he still ends up in the mid rounds. He's always a great value. And he's always a great flex option. So keep targeting Duke Johnson. And I'd say at this point, until we have a clearer point in training camp, like if you're doing best balls right now, which a lot of people are, if you're doing dynasties, like startup dynasty stuff, I'd probably say just avoid the Browns backfield.
Yeah, that's a very good call because like you hit it on the head. Hugh Jackson is the head coach, so that's all you really need to know.
Yeah.
Let's head to the wide receivers here on our little Cliff Notes run through of the early NFL info. Green Bay Packers, again, we already talked about their backfield, and it's a trend with the Packers is there's one thing you can rely on, and it's Aaron Rodgers. Everything else is a mess at times. Mm-hmm. And, they lost their workhorse, Jordy Nelson, and we can talk about him a little later. But they still have Devontae Adams, who burst onto the scene last year, like really burst on last year. Mm-hmm. You got Randall Cobb. They drafted a couple interesting rookie receivers. They have Jimmy Graham. Tons of options. When it comes to the wide receiver position, if you're going to Green Bay, what are you looking to exploit?
Okay. I love Devontae Adams. It's actually the season before in 2016, he had a really good season too. And then last year, it was kind of like, oh, is he able to repeat the 12 touch? I think it was either 12 or 15 touchdowns. I think it was 12 touchdowns in 2016. And yes, he did. He absolutely did on a per game basis. But I'm really scared because he had 2 concussions last year. I feel like he's one concussion away from missing 6 weeks or contemplating retirement or God, he's really young, so I don't know if he can afford to contemplate retirement, but I think more of a like missing a month or 6 weeks if he gets his bell rung. That's something I'm definitely worried about. But that doesn't mean I'm going to avoid him. Like he's the top dog in Green Bay, and he's someone I definitely would take the chance on. Anyone in the NFL can get their bell rung, so that's not gonna deter me from him. Jimmy Graham I like a lot for the red zone. It's interesting because Aaron Rodgers never has been one to target tight ends. I think that Jimmy Graham could probably play out of the slot a little bit, especially in the red zone when they're lining up three on the on either side of the field. He could be lining up on the inside, standing up right away. And I think him and Aaron Rodgers will get along famously. Randall Cobb, he's so up and down, but he's someone that you won't have to pay a lot for, who could, end up having some pretty good games. I think probably if you play in best ball leagues, I think he's probably a good option for you. As far as St. Thomas, it's just gonna, if he makes the roster, I mean, anything can happen. So I definitely keep an eye on the waiver wire and keep an eye on how he's doing. Or I'm sorry, I said St. Thomas. His name's St. Brown. But yeah, as far as the Packers go, Aaron Rodgers is going to make everyone relevant pretty much. It's just Devontae Adams is probably the best option, and Jimmy Graham, I think he'll probably be a pretty good value in the mid rounds.
Yeah, Jimmy Graham's a guy I like to gravitate towards a lot when he drops the last few years. He hasn't gone nearly as high as he used to go back in the days, obviously. And he's just that red zone presence. You even saw it once him and Wilson got comfortable. He started having bigger games in the second half last year. And I think that's definitely, Rodgers, like you said, he really is not a tight end target type guy, but he's also a guy that he likes the bigger target because, in the middle of the field, Jimmy Graham's going to own that. And he could do that all day long. So that can be a big plus. And it could open up those little kind of slant outs and slant ins they like with Adams and Cobb. You got Graham in the middle. It opens those up to the outsides and that can take place there. But I like the point on Adams, like you said, to be careful with, though. And that's why Cobb in a best ball is probably better. Concussions are no joke. And once you have a few of them, it gets scary on how frequent these can start to happen. And it could really
they were things. Like, we
bad.
don't really grade concussions, but they were bad concussions. They were the worst.
I don't even know. I remember the one hit he had. I can't remember who he was against, but I can visualize it happening again.
Was it Danny Trevathan from the Bears?
I think so. Yes. Yeah. And he played the next week. Like, and they wonder why there's a concussion policy, but it's a whole other story on another day. But like, I don't even know how that was possible. But let's talk about one of the receivers that's in your non-draftable wide receiver column you wrote, Mike Evans. And he's played in 15 games all 4 seasons. He's had at least 122 targets in all 4 seasons, at least 68 catches in all 4 seasons, only 2 big touchdown receiving seasons. What is keeping you from, besides Winston now being out for 3 weeks, what's keeping you from liking Mike Evans? Because you wrote
I had an easy out.
Because you wrote this before that. I want to hear your explanation.
Yeah. No, I think he's reached the peak of his targets in Tampa probably with the 138. That I think that's the exact number that he saw last year. I watch him a lot, and I'm just not impressed. I mean, he has 2 seasons where he's had double-digit touchdowns, and then he's had 2 seasons where he's had like right around 5 touchdowns. And Tampa is bringing in more and more weapons every year. The running game should be better, so they're not going to have to just throw it up 20 yards and hope Evans comes down with it. They're going to want to get Deshaun Jackson more involved if they want to win, if they actually want to win games like they need to for the for the front office and the coaching staff to keep their jobs. Obviously, the Jameis thing is probably a scapegoat, so Dirk Cutter might live to see another year. Chris Godwin's on the come up. OJ Howard should make strides this year. They signed Cameron Brate long term, so you got 2 tight ends that could be red zone presence where Mike Evans would usually make his presence known and garner up a lot of fantasy value. So I think he's a 9th receiver off the board. He won't be anymore with Jameis Winston being suspended for the first 3 games. He finished 17th last year with top 10 targets. I just feel kind of like with Marshawn Lynch, except a totally different situation. I just think the ceiling's too low. Mike Evans, though, he's safe because he's had 1,000 yards in every season. But a couple of those seasons, he's only had 70-some catches. That's nothing to scoff at, but if that's a if that's a wide receiver that you're taking in the first 2 rounds, I mean, in PPR, you want more than 70-some catches because you can get Larry Fitzgerald 3 or 4 rounds later.
You said something there that piques my interest. He was going around wide receiver 9, and that's obviously going to change now. How far does he have to fall to actually make him relevant to you? Because like you said, a floor like that's still something that's useful for your team. But where would you start targeting him? Like 3rd round, maybe?
Yeah, 3rd or 4th round. If he falls to the 4th round, I'm probably going to scoop him up. I don't want to be a Mike Evans hater because he is like he's a great wide receiver and he's been consistent in his statistics. But it's just he doesn't excite me in the 2nd round, and but like you said, and I mean a lot of people said he's safe. So if you're looking for safe, if you're going wide receiver, and you're taking Antonio Brown, you want to get your wide receiver too. If you're going 0 RB, I think Mike Evans is a fine option in the 3rd or 4th round. So. I mean, take it for what it's worth. I'm just probably not going to touch him.
Okay. Let's go to the Minnesota Vikings, who had a 2-headed monster, and you already mentioned Case Keenum now in Denver, and things have changed there. They have the Adam Thielen, Stefon Diggs combo, but like 4 years aged. So Thielen, 91 catches for 1,276 and 4 touchdowns. Diggs, 64 for 849 and 8 touchdowns. It seems when Diggs had big games, he'd just go off. Then he'd have quiet weeks where Thielen – like just receptions alone, the difference in the receptions shows he was such a consistent machine in this offense. When you're looking at these 2 guys, how do you dictate? Like, do you prefer one over the other? I'm guessing PPR you'd want Thielen, but how do you break down these 2 when you're looking fantasy wise?
Okay, I've always been Thielen over Diggs. Well, I guess not always because I mean he just emerged a couple years back. Last year I wrote. When everyone was really high on Diggs, why would you take Stefon Diggs when you can get Adam Thielen about 3 or 4 or 5 rounds later? And that was one of my few that actually panned out. I did have a good a few good guesses. I had a couple misses too, like Lamar Miller. I thought he was going to have a really big year last year, but it just didn't pan out.
Yeah, looked like he was going to.
Yeah, but back-to-back years with 6 touchdowns, what can you do? That offensive line is horrible, and I failed to see that last year. I prefer Adam Thielen. I still do. I play a lot of PPR, so I think he's got nowhere to go up with Cousins. I think he's a really safe bet. I think if you're looking at a stat line from last year, I think that's probably a pretty safe guess for this season too, with an upgraded quarterback. The signing of Kirk Cousins makes me like Stefon Diggs more too. It makes me like him more than I did last year. The thing with Stefon Diggs is, like you mentioned, he tends to disappear in games, and that's kind of what I wrote going into last season, and it kind of happened. But I think with a more consistent quarterback, I think it'll keep him more engaged, and I think he could really have a big year. I think both of them could have monster years. I think the Minnesota offense as a whole could be possibly the best offense in the league this year, especially bringing over DeFilippo from Philadelphia. He was their quarterbacks coach last year. He's going to be the offensive coordinator, so they shouldn't lose a step at all from Norv Turner leaving. So, or was it Norv Turner? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be a dynamite offense. You get Cook back. You got Cousins in town, who's an upgrade. Those two receivers, lots and lots to like there in Minnesota. Let's talk about New England.
Before we get into that, just kind of to clarify, like I would take Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs above their ADP. Like they're both
above it. Okay.
Above
I like that.
ADP. Yeah.
I like that statement because I think they will perform it. And one last thing, like you said, is with the new system and the new quarterback, especially, we know Cousins loves his like short routes, but he can go big too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll help Diggs out a ton. So
definitely
get the PPR points you're looking for. But I do like that. All right, let's go to New England, a team that I despise as a Dolphins fan. So me and you, we both share bad Florida teams, but New England's always that team that has a ton of who's this guy? Where did he come from? And it's Tom Brady makes them all pros.
Mm-hmm.
So in the receiving core, you got Julian Edelman, who's out 4 games to start the year. You got Chris Hogan, who was really, really good when healthy last year. Somehow Kenny Britt is still alive and in the NFL. Jordan Matthews, if he ever stayed healthy, super talented. The list goes on and on about guys at one point in time were relevant and somehow wouldn't be shocked if Tom Brady made these guys relevant. How are you attacking this receiving board? Not to mention we still have Gronk, who's going to be Gronk probably.
Yeah, I'm not going to draft Gronk. He's not on the field enough for me. I'm going to target Travis Kelce if I'm going tight end that early. So that acts as one. With Julian Edelman out, it's interesting. My buddy from Razzball thinks that they could maybe transition to running the ball a little more the first 4 weeks, especially with James White.
That's been a rumor with Sony Michel pick.
Sony Michel, Rex Burkhead, James White. Actually, if I'm targeting anyone in the passing game, it's going to be Rex Burkhead, and I'm going to put him in my flex. Same with James White. I don't think they want Tom Brady stretching the field, so I think both those guys could, average 5-6 catches a game and maybe get into the end zone. And I guess a sleeper to look out for would be Braxton Berrios, the rookie wide receiver that they grabbed from Miami. He could play the Julian Edelman role. Chris Hogan is definitely someone I would target. I think at the wide receiver position, he will stand to benefit the most with Julian Edelman being out. So Chris Hogan, I definitely take a look at in the 6th or 7th round. I doubt he'll be there. I would even go 5th round if he's hanging around there. Yeah,
right now they got Chris Hogan ranked about the 30th wide receiver out there. You got guys like Pierre Garçon, who in PPR leagues was gold. You got Robert Woods, Devin Funchess, Sammy Watkins, all in that area. I'd like Chris Hogan over any of those guys.
I'd rather have Chris Hogan than all 3 of those guys. He's gonna
Michael Crabtree.
No, I don't want him at all. I'm not touching anyone in Baltimore besides Alex Collins. It's just Joe Flacco. He's had one season where he's thrown for 4,000 yards. Mike Wallace was fine at the end of drafts and you got some big games out of him, whatever, but he's not even, he was their number 1 receiver. He's not even someone you can slot in every week when he was there. And I just don't think bringing in Michael Crabtree is going to solve that offense. So I think it's going to be business as usual. And want a volume back, and hopefully they make Alex Collins a volume back, and I think he can outperform his ADP, stepping back to running backs a little bit.
No, I like Alex Collins. He came up big for me last year in many, many ways. Let's go to Dallas for a second. We know they lost or they didn't lose. They got rid of Des Bryant, and now they have Alan Hearns, who's projected to be the number 1 in their system. And it was just a few years ago he was a beast in Jacksonville, and he's been good the last few years, but not a beast by any means. But now focal point, Dak's got to throw it somewhere. is Allen Hurns a guy that you're looking at? He's like the 52nd ranked wide receiver right now.
That's a late round flyer. I mean, the reports out of Dallas have been that he looks like the number one wide receiver, and he's going to be kind of the replacement. But we haven't gotten into training camp yet, and I mean that's just OTA speak. But no, like I wasn't huge on. It didn't perk my interest when he signed with Dallas. I'm probably just going to avoid the Dallas offense at all costs, except for Ezekiel Elliott. I think this will be his offense, and I think he's going to be a huge asset for your fantasy team if you end up with him in the first round, especially with how talented that offensive line is. I'm going to write up my quarterback undraftables, and Dak Prescott's going to be on it. There's
nothing to like there. There's nothing. The cupboard is literally empty.
His probably the best season of his career was his rookie season when he only threw 3 interceptions. Unless they're able to bring some talent to the receiver core, all of a sudden he turns into Russell Wilson, which I don't think is going to happen. So yeah, I guess if Allen Hurns sitting there in the last round, I'll let him sit on my bench and see what happens.
Okay. Just for fun here, Dez Bryant, where do you think he ends up?
Oh, who's going to tear their ACL? Yeah, he's going to be a training camp ad. That's if I had to guess one team, I would say San Francisco. But I don't think they want him.
He seems like too much of a problem for a lot of teams. Like they don't want that mess.
Yeah. So let's think about it. Who would want Dez Bryant? Maybe a small market team. Say Marquise Lee gets hurt in training camp. Jacksonville. Yeah. But does he fit their offense? And they have D.D. Westbrook, who I like a lot. And I mean, they're a running team. They got Leonard Fournette. They just signed Norwell to play guard for them. So that means that they want to commit more to running the ball inside like they have. And yeah, I'm just not sold on him. I'm just not sold that he'll be on a roster, you know?
That's the thing is I don't know where he's going to be because he's the ultimate diva. Like people wouldn't take Chad Johnson after a while. You're starting to see the similar thing here with Dez Bryant. And
what is he,
you can 30? See maybe that's what I was going to – let me look it up real quick because you think of guys like Dez Bryant and you think maybe like a team, say the Jets or something along those lines.
Yeah,
they might see something
Jets,
like there.
The Jets could – I mean, it's going to depend on what happens with Robbie Anderson. He could be a possible suspension, but I don't think it'll be more than 2 or 3 games. Like that whole – sorry to interrupt you, but that whole Robbie Anderson thing was weird. I mean – it sounded like really some pretty damning stuff, but he's getting probation and a bunch of charges dropped, and then it sounded like he took a plea and he's not going to go to jail at all. So it's going to be up to the NFL whether he's suspended or not. So who's to say what's going to happen with Robbie Anderson? But if he's playing 16 games, like that's someone I'm drafting in my top 30 wide receivers. Like,
but he was awesome. No
questions asked. You know?
Yeah. And on the Dez front, Dez is going to be 30 in November.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard to say someone won't sign him, but his type of receiver is not really a fit anymore unless you have a certain kind of offense. So Tampa already has Mike Evans, and that's kind of like a comp for him. Julio Jones in Atlanta, who's twice as talented as he is, because Dez Bryant can't run routes. So who wants a receiver who can't run routes? So
he's going to be in trouble. Trouble finding a job.
Maybe
last
Cincinnati.
Maybe. Yeah, Cincinnati will take anything half the time.
Right.
So that's a great landing spot right there. Them or even, hey, would it shock you if Baltimore grabbed him? Really?
Right.
Like just a big guy for Joe Flacco to throw it up to and make him look better than he really is because he can catch things that other people can't. Like that's Joe Flacco to a T.
Right.
Last guy I want to ask you about. He looks like a freak of nature with his offseason program, and he missed all of 15 and 16. Came back for 5 games last year. I'm talking Josh Gordon. This guy, we know when he's on the field and he's focused, is a physical specimen and just a freak show out there. But the on the field and focused are two completely long shot things from time to time with him. What's your overall thought on a guy like Josh Gordon?
Okay. It's really tough. Like, it's really tough. Best ball, absolutely. Like, take him at his ADP. He disappears for games when he is on the field. He did it last year too. It's probably because he's a big focal point of the defense and the secondary strategy. So adding Jarvis Landry could help him out a little bit. Tyrod Taylor, it's Hugh Jackson, man. It's going to depend on what type of quarterback that Tyrod Taylor decides to be in Cleveland, because last year a lot of people noticed that Tyrod Taylor did not take chances. Like he just tried to stay away from the turnover. Like he didn't want to turn the ball over. Heavily scrutinized in Buffalo, and he doesn't want to be the reason that they lose ball games. And plus, they just didn't have anyone to throw to. In Cleveland, he has Jarvis Landry. Like I said, there's Josh Gordon. Their tight end, God, I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Njoku?
Yeah, David Njoku. Corey Coleman, if he decides to show up. There's a lot of weapons, so will he be more aggressive? Will Hugh Jackson want him to be more aggressive? If he does end up being more aggressive and, he can get out of the pocket and just throw it downfield and Josh Gordon beats everyone, I mean, he can be a great asset to your fantasy football team. I think as a wide receiver too, I think he's definitely worth a shot at. Do you have his ADP off the top of the head? I think he's 3rd round, isn't he?
I just have I don't have ADPs up. I just have the wide receiver rankings, and he is. He's the 20th ranked wide receiver right now. So
yeah, absolutely.
You're probably a 4th round or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I would. I would take Josh Gordon. I think he's worth a shot, especially if I didn't really talk. You asked me earlier about strategy, and this name slipped my head. But I think Keenan Allen's falling into the 2nd round.
Oh, I'm a huge Keenan Allen fan every year.
Me too.
I'm a sucker every year for him.
And last year it paid off.
Finally.
Yes. I think my draft strategy this year is probably in most leagues, I'm going to go running back 1st round and Keenan Allen in the 2nd round where I can.
I think that's kind of what I was doing last year.
I think that's probably a winner this year. But overall, yeah, I like to keep a balanced squad in drafts. I don't like to fade receivers. I don't like to fade running backs. Like I'm taking best available according to my needs, and it's worked out for me. Most of my teams go to the playoffs, So,
well, awesome. Well, Matt, that wraps things up. Great stuff here. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find you and what you got coming up?
Yeah, you can find me at Razzball_MB on Twitter. RAZZBALL_MB. I just put out the 2 articles that we talked about. The players I'm not going to be taking at running back or wide receiver. I'll have my quarterbacks up probably by early next week. Go back and check out the podcast. I've had some pretty great guests. I've had Matt Harmon on. I've had Danny Kelly from The Ringer, Charles McDonald from SB Nation and the Falcoholic. Yeah, it's been a pretty good year for podcasts. So definitely check that out. It's called the Razzblitz Podcast. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll definitely find it. But yeah, I'll just be plugging away at football. I also write a little bit of baseball. I write an article every week based on the player rater and just kind of find values on there for Razzball. So yeah, check me out.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me, man. Everybody go check him out. I actually subscribed to the Razzblitz podcast last week when we started talking. So I'm going to start giving it a weekly listen to you as well, or whenever they come out as you get going in the season. So thanks for joining us, everybody.
We might even get you on. We got division previews coming up. What's your favorite football team?
Oh, the Dolphins, but then I have to talk about the Patriots.
Well, shit, we might get you on for the AFC East preview. I'll definitely hop in your DMs for that one.
Yeah, let me know. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll definitely have some fun with that. But again, thanks, man. We might talk again before the season starts. We'll see how things pan out here. But everybody, this was Bench with Bubba, episode 102, talking some fantasy football with Matt Bowe of Razzball. Catch you guys later.